Look, as ball knowers, we can call it like it is. This past weekend, not the best slate of college football. We can admit that. But in the grand scheme of things, having this past weekend serve as the appetizer or the cocktail party for what's going to be rivalry week, conference championship weekend, the college football playoffs, not the worst trade-off in the world. Welcome in to the Spring Break College Football Show. Today is Monday, November 24th. Just a few days past week 13 of the college football season. Just a few days ahead of not just Thanksgiving, but rivalry weekend. So much fun stuff to get into. On today's show, we will skim through the results we saw on a football field this past weekend. Not a ton to take away, but we'll touch up on some things. We will talk the latest news on the college football coaching fronts. Who's staying, who's going, who do we still have no clue about? So we'll get to all of that. We'll also try to figure out what the College Football Playoff Committee is going to bless us with on Tuesday night. A very unpredictable group of people, but at the same time, very predictable. And then, of course, we will always have a lot of fun while doing it. Before we get to all of that, it's the beginning of the show, so I always got to do the same thing. If you are here for the very first time, first of all, thank you. I appreciate you guys being here. If you are watching on the YouTube channel, you just saw me point at you. I want you to hit subscribe on this channel. Please like the video, comment, interact, share with a friend, whatever you need to do to support us. I try to give back tenfold worth of content to you all. If you are listening, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast, please subscribe to the channel. Please leave a 5-star review. I know you can't see me point at the screen, but I'm telling you I am, so it must mean it's true. And make sure, show some love on the socials. We're just a TikTok show now. At Spring Blake CFB. Twitter's dead. I think what it is if you didn't get Twitter rolling by the year maybe 2023, it was hard to get it to grow. We're not really using Twitter to the best of our abilities, so we're a TikTok show. So go follow us at Spring Blake CFB. All right, so I know I harped on the slate being weak overall, but the game of the week was a fun one up in Eugene. Oregon moving past the Trojans. Final score in that one is 42-27. I went into this game having two very big questions. One question about USC, one question about Oregon, and both of my questions came out pretty validated. I had some concerns about whether or not this Oregon pass defense was actually this top of the charts group that the stat sheet told us was. I think they entered the week holding teams to the fewest explosive passing plays. I think they had in total passing offense the fewest yards allowed, but they had played a lot of not too shabby pass attacks on the schedule. And of course, USC goes in, throws for 330 yards on them. Oregon gives up 2 scores, had a tough time defending Jacoby Lane, Tanook Hines, Mekhi Lemon, 7 receptions, 34 yards. Wasn't the best day he's ever had, but he still made impact plays when it was needed. As I mentioned, Oregon had only given up 14 explosive passing plays in the first 10 games of the season. Lincoln Riley's group found 5 in this game alone. But I also wondered in this matchup if the Trojans actually had a top 30 ground game, just like the stat sheet told us. And as I imagine, that stat sheet lied to us. USC averaged just 1.9 yards per carry on 28 attempts. And Jaden Maiava, I always do that first time I say his name. Jaden Maiava was only sacked once. So those numbers on the rushing totals are not really that far off from what the Trojans actually did on the ground. So both of those things on the stat sheet were lying to us, but because football is primarily a game won in the trenches, USC's inability to run the football outweighed whatever they were going to try and do through the air. It's hard to hold on to an early 7-point lead or keep the game knotted at 14 apiece if you can't chew out the clock and get to some third and manageables. Oregon won the time of possession battle by 6 minutes, held USC to 7 of 16 on third downs, and hey, 3 phases of football. Tough day for the Trojans on that third of the game. Played a huge role in this one. Oregon gets a punt return from Malik Benson. He takes it back, I think, 84 yards for a score. And then USC's kicker misses a chip shot right before the half. So that's a 10-point swing you're getting from special teams play. And with that result, the Ducks are just one game away from solidifying themselves a spot in the college football playoffs, and now the Trojans are going to be stuck outside the club looking in. I'm not too sure how much I want to add on the Trojans at the risk of sounding redundant over what I said about this team last week. And there's been a few instances where I finish up a show and I'm like, haven't I just beaten this drum dead by now? But that's because we're ball knowers. The stuff we know in week 2, still alive here in week 13, ball knower. Even though I projected Oregon to win, I said Oregon was going to cover the 9.5 point spread, which they did. I knew I was still going to leave this game happy with where the Trojans sat for 2026 and beyond. And look, despite a 10-point swing on special teams, losing the turnover edge 2-1, you still were in the thick of things and taking it to the Ducks early in this game. This was and still is a different Trojan football program. You know, with a win over UCLA this weekend, they'll finish with their best record since Lincoln Riley's first year there. They have shown us this season an ability to win ugly ground and pound style games, both with Nebraska and Iowa, something that we haven't seen from USC up to this point. And the defense, it didn't look great against Oregon. I'll admit that, but it is still vastly improved from where it was in 2023, still better than where it was in 2024, and should be in a really good spot heading into 2026, especially if they do not lose defensive coordinator D'Anton Lynn to a head coaching gig. He is one of those hot coordinators where I worry that a team might go and poach him, and then all of a sudden the guy that's been making things work at USC defensively is now out the door. If you can keep him around for another season, it's hard for me to feel bad about the Trojans. Now, everybody else, I listen to everybody Sunday, Monday. I'm sure anybody I listen to tomorrow, they're all saying the same thing. Isn't this thing just time for us to move on from Lincoln Riley here in USC? It's been 4 or 5 seasons now, no playoffs, at least 3 losses in every season. I get it. It's lazy and it's easy to do. I think they're set up for a big 2026. Obviously, if you're a Trojan fan now, you don't want to hear that after being set up for a really big 2022 and 23 and 24 and 25, and you just keep coming up short. The results that you saw from this team make me feel a lot better moving forward. You're always going to have a good offense under Lincoln Riley. You're going to have good quarterback play. You'll always have talented wideouts. I think the trench play is what stood out the most for me for this team this season. Now, again, against an Oregon, you still look a little bit overmatched, but all you need to do is start, stacking steady improvement year after year. And if this was the biggest jump we've seen, which I believe it is, and I think this is the biggest jump year over year we've seen from a Lincoln Riley team in Southern Cal, I think we're headed for a really good spot in 2026. So I know I said I didn't want to sound redundant here talking about the Trojans, but I just needed to get that out one more time and kind of just plant my flag that I'm a believer in what he's doing. It's just taking some time. Now, as for the Ducks, whoo, baby. There's no way to say whoa, baby, and not sound a little bit weird, but holy shit. Brilliant display on offense from Dan Lanning's group. Still, despite being down to Corey and Moore for what I believe is now the 3rd straight week, having some guys get banged up along the way. I know they lost their center at one point. Just, a couple different injuries here and there that don't help you out. But Dante Moore was terrific. 22 of 30, 257 yards, 2 scores, did have an interception. The Ducks ran the ball well, 179 yards, 104 from Noah Whittington. He also found the end zone once in that game. The Ducks just have so many playmakers in the passing game. Kenyon Sadiq, best tight end in college football right now. He finished the day with 72 yards, 2 scores. Malik Benson not only had the punt return, but also added 67 yards through the air. I cannot stress this enough about the Ducks coming out of this game and projecting forward for them. There might not be an offense I want to face less in the postseason than this Oregon group. Sure, Dante Moore is not the perfect quarterback. He's been pretty up and down as the season's gone on. But who at the quarterback position this year really is like that? Oh, yep, every single game I'm guaranteed a stud. Ty Simpson has fallen off the last couple of games. Fernando Mendoza is pretty up there, where you're just getting a good, consistent effort. But other guys at the top, Marcel Reed's very shaky. Garrett Nussmeier took a huge step back. All of the better quarterbacks in this season, we've kind of just been like, okay, no one's really separated themselves from the pack. And because of that, I'm not too worried about Dante Moore as we head into the postseason. They still have a handful of tailbacks that are always going to churn out 4 or 5 yards a carry, an offensive line that'll bully you on the ground and protect the quarterback. And they're one of the more explosive passing games in the country. And that's despite being without their preseason wide receiver one, Evan Stewart, who tore his patella in the spring or summer, I believe. And then also being without their new wide receiver one, DeCorian Moore, over the last few weeks. By the way, the old and the new wide receiver ones, that's 2 studs that you'll be getting there on the field. They're both nearing their return. Just think about that for a second. So you could be sitting here come playoff time, a team that is slowly rounding into form. The offense, Dante Moore, Noah Whittington, Jordan Davison, Kenyon Sadiq, Malik Benson, and then you add in a healthy DeCorian Moore and Evan Stewart. Watch out. This is a group on offense that could pop in the postseason, very reminiscent to how Ohio State did last year when they got humbled by Michigan, came out into the playoffs and just said, you know what, we'll race you to 50. And they were just explosive. They had the tailbacks. Oregon resembles on offense a group that could do something similar, especially when they get those 2 wide receivers back healthy. Now, do they have the same defense as Ohio State? I don't think so. I think they're really talented up front. Got a great safety. Dinneman, I believe is his last name. Corners, I'm still not too sure about. But all in all, when we get closer, as we're approaching this point of the season where you need to be playing your best football, Oregon is doing that on offense without its 2 top wide receivers. And in the big picture for Oregon, like this whole season has been about peaking at the right time. Last year's lesson when they got smacked by Ohio State was we need to be playing our best ball in November, December, and beyond. You need to be at your best for the last lap of the mile-long run. They had a little bit of a lull for a bit, couple of low scoring efforts against Wisconsin, Iowa, but now they're back-to-back 42-point outings against teams that are above 500. And again, all while still working back some of the more important parts of the offense. So that just shows me that this team has the juice to go on a nice run through the postseason. Because again, it is a year where Ohio State looks to be above everybody else. But that mix of everybody else, you're in there even if you've just got one part of your team that is firing on all cylinders. And I don't believe the defense is that far off. So huge win. 1 win away. Got to go into Washington. That's spread. There's some lines this week. There's a couple lines this week. Oregon, Washington. I think the Ducks are 6.5 point favorites. Crazy. And then you've also got Alabama, Auburn. Alabama's minus 3.5. We're not going to talk too much about the Crimson Tide today, but those 2 lines, they pop out. They pop out. Not to mention Texas A&M, just 2.5 point favorites against Texas. Going to be some really, really interesting games with playoff hopes on the line. But yes, big win for the Ducks. Hard to not feel good about this team as one of the top 5-6 contenders to win it all. Playing their best football at the right time of the season. So let's take a quick break. We're going to get into some coach talk, back to football, to the playoffs, and then we'll send you on your merry way.
Balake. Where is Balake at?
So yes, as I mentioned, a little break from the action, I wanted to talk about one of the more surprising announcements I think that we have heard all season. And this is a season that gave us James Franklin out at Penn State, just about a month into the regular season. We saw Brian Kelly out at LSU. We saw, who else have we seen? We've had all the Lane Kiffin stuff, Billy Napier. This might be the most surprising news, and that is that Florida State announced Sunday that despite a 5-6 season, Mike Norvell will return as the team's head coach in 2026. Florida State, obviously a team massively underwhelming for the second year in a row. They are 2-6 in conference play. This is following a 2-win season from 2024. I have been under the impression, like most people, that this was heading toward a breakup at the end of the year. But instead, this is now going to serve as one of the strongest precautionary tales you can find in this new age of college athletics, and on two separate fronts. The first is that you cannot allow yourself, as a head coach, as a manager for a program, as a university, you cannot allow yourself to become singularly dependent on the transfer portal. FSU hit this incredibly perfect storm in 2023. They do the portal, they get everybody in, and boom, undefeated 13-0 season. Better than anybody could have ever expected. One of the first tales of like, oh my God, this transfer portal, pretty neat, huh? And then it unraveled ever since. And the tale in that is when you rely on the transfer portal, and then the next year you're like, oh wait, all those transfer portal ads, they may be transferred out, or they graduated because they were already juniors or seniors. All of a sudden, oh shoot, we need to go back to the portal again, don't we? And then you go back to the portal, and it brings you what? Was that DJ Uyunglele? And then it flopped. And you're like, okay, well, let's go back to the portal again. And then you bring in all these new pieces. Okay, no, we messed up on the players. We changed the coaching staff. Now we got the right guys in. We beat Alabama. Yes, we did it. And it's been awful since. It's been terrible. The transfer portal is awesome. It's a great way to add in complementary pieces. Texas Tech, for example, who I hope is watching what's happening at Florida State and saying like, hey, can we learn from this? Texas Tech had a good team in place from recruiting. They're in a hotbed of Texas. They were doing well recruiting. And then they said, okay, well, we could also just add guys on top of this. We've got a starting defensive line, but could you imagine how good those guys would be if they were our second stringers? So yeah, let's add a David Bailey out of Stanford. Let's add dudes up front. Let's add playmakers. Let's facilitate and just sprinkle in the portal. The portal is good to add complementary pieces. But if you are relying on it to fill your entire roster, you don't have a team. You don't have a team. You have a bunch of like hired mercenaries who are all in there for their own reasons. And it's tough to just go kumbaya as a team, especially when things start to fall apart. And that's what I think the issue is. It's like, it's fun when it's winning. When it's working, it's like, hey, look at what we're doing right now. But as soon as you hit that first moment of adversity and you get punched in the mouth and you're like, ooh, how do we lose that one? The response, if you're not a team, is only going to get worse. And that's what we've seen. So that's the first front. Like you need recruiting. You need player development. You need to build in college football. You can't just go shopping, you know? So that's the first precautionary tale of this whole Florida State situation, is that you cannot rely on the transfer portal. The second one is you got to be really careful when you start handing out these buyout clauses. Make no mistake, this decision by Florida State is not because they have confidence in Mike Norvell. I know they put out like a 5-paragraph essay that said, hey, we're all back in Mike Norvell. 2026 will be the year we rebound. He goes into the press conference and he says it too. Everybody there is lying to you. They know that the only reason he's coming back is because financially it would ruin Florida State. There's too much money tied up to it. And it's an issue that they brought upon themselves. And this is a whole like side story to it, but the whole reason that buyout clause is there, which is very interesting, is Nick Saban retires. And Jimmy Sexton, one of the greatest agents out there, tells Florida State officials, hey, Mike Norvell's about to leave for Alabama. He's the guy that they've circled. What can you do to help him out? Can you put a little bit more money in here? You don't want to lose him to Alabama. You just had a 13-0 season. You don't want to lose him to Alabama. So they give him a fat buyout. And here he is all these years later. You can't get rid of him. And it's been terrible. 2-10, 5-6. It's been a disaster. Here's the thing with Mike Norvell moving forward is if you are stuck with this head coach and everybody knows it, how are you going to be able to salvage anything in 2026 and beyond? If I'm a coach and I'm hiring, if I'm searching for a position as a positional coach or a coordinator job, depending on what changes FSU makes in the offseason, do I want to join a staff that I know is a dead man walking? If I'm a recruit or a transfer and the money is competitive at Florida State versus wherever I might be going, but I know that the Florida State coach is only there because they cannot get rid of him financially, and he will be once you can get rid of him financially. What is the point in joining that program? This is going to be one of the early, like when we look back 20 years from now at college football, we'll be looking at this situation at Florida State and being like, this was the first example of how all of it can just smack you across the face. How you can make terrible mistakes that handcuff you not just for 1 or 2, but 3 to 5 seasons. Because Florida State is stuck now. I don't see how it's going to be better in 2026. I mean, could you get above 500? Sure, they're better this year than they were last year. But we all know where this thing is heading. We all know that eventually Mike Norvell will not be the head coach at Florida State. And 20 years from now, we'll look at this situation and we'll look at the 13-0 and we'll look at what came after it. And we'll say, hey, this is the early signs of learning the mistakes you can make in the transfer portal, the mistakes you can make with coaches' buyouts. And hopefully there are a lot of teams in college football right now that are not waiting 20 years to look back on it and realize. Hopefully they're looking at this right now and being like, okay, well, how do we avoid this? Because this is devastating for a premier program in the sport. Just an absolute mess. You know what's not as messy, still a little messy because the sport is broken? Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin obviously is sitting here just a few days away from what is going to be a joint statement between him and the athletic director the day after the Egg Bowl. Who knows what that is going to say? Who knows what it is going to mean? Who knows where Lane Kiffin is going? And that's one thing that I think is so funny about the Lane Kiffin conversation right now. So many people are just like claiming to know something. They're claiming like, oh yes, no. If you go on Twitter right now, you're like, Lane's going to LSU. And then you'll see another account. Lane's going to Florida. And then a third one. Lane's staying at Ole Miss. I'm going to put this out there. I don't know where Lane Kiffin's going. I'm going to be the first to say it. I have no clue if he's going to Florida, LSU, or staying at Ole Miss. I know that's bold. That's bold of me to go out there and say that. I'll be the first to do it. I got no idea where he's going. I think he's leaving. I do. I don't think that you would let this stretch on long enough if you weren't leaving. I don't know if he's made up his mind fully, and maybe there's something that changes between now and Friday where he's like, you know what, this is my home. I just think when the chatter came around Curt Cignetti, he signed his extension, and a fat one. He had a blank check. When Penn State started circling around Matt Rule signed an extension. A lot of these guys are signing their deals to stay. And Lane wouldn't be doing this to his team if he wasn't seriously considering leaving Ole Miss. Because all this does is, create the unfortunate distraction that it is. And that's a whole other story. College football is broken in the whole timeline. National Signing Day being conference championship weekend and the transfer portal happening during the playoffs is an absolute mess. I'm not saying anything new here. It is the worst thing that's happening in this sport right now. The calendar is ruining so many things that should be so much easier to work out. It should be easy. And I know the issue becomes that the athletes are also students and you need them on the academic calendars. For all the money that this thing makes, there's got to be a solution. There's got to be a way to work it out. I don't get it, but yeah, I think he's leaving. If I had to guess, here's one thing I'll say. Right now, there's a lot of volume at LSU. I don't know if I'd confuse volume for truth. I'm almost curious if all the LSU chatter and the very little we're hearing about Florida makes Florida a little bit more likely. Lane doesn't want a distraction right now. He's a smart coach. He knows what this is doing to the team, to the program. He's trying to minimize it as best as he can. He's in a really unfortunate situation. But you're hearing contract details at LSU. You're hearing all the meetings. You're hearing some stuff with Florida that they went and took a look around the facilities, the area, all that stuff. There's a lot more volume coming out of LSU right now, which makes me think Florida's doing a better job of keeping this close to the vest. And I think their ability to do that is what's making it maybe easier for Lane to say, like, they're at least trying. They know that I'm going to leave to one of these two schools. They're doing their best to keep things quiet. I've said from the start, I think he's going to Florida. Look, if LSU puts down the biggest check and it's one of those situations that you can't refuse, whatever, I get it. I think Ole Miss and LSU have the blank check. I think Florida might not. But I would almost wonder if Florida is keeping things a little bit quieter, if that's something that is making Lane's decision a little bit easier. We'll find out soon. Look, next week, so this week we're going to do our show today, obviously. I'm going to put out a Wednesday one from a remote location as I'm going to see my family for Thanksgiving. Next week, we'll know what's happening. We'll have the joint statement from the athletic director and Lane out Saturday after the Egg Bowl. Here's the one final thing I'll say about Lane Kiffin and this whole fiasco is, why can't it be different? And I know there's a laundry list of reasons why it can't be. If Lane is the prize, if he is the belle of the ball, the homecoming queen, everyone wants to be with him, why can't there be an exception to what they end up doing here? Why can't there be a, hey, yes, I'm accepting this position here, but I have done such a good job at Ole Miss. This place has meant so much to me. From the program's perspective, they have needed Lane and loved him and enjoyed the relationship. Why can't there be a combination of, when Ole Miss's season is done, I'll be going to Florida, but Ole Miss's season is not done? I just wonder if there's some sort of middle ground they can find. And I know Florida is going to want him right away because you need to know about the recruiting and the transfers and all that sort of stuff. Like, Florida needs to start their thing. But can't this be a story of good faith and just two programs that understand what they're going to get out of it? Ole Miss understands that they're going to lose. They're going to lose out on Lane, and they can start their coaching search. They can do all of that stuff that doesn't involve Lane. But can this team just focus on being a team for the rest of the season? I know the answer is no, which is what sucks about this right now. I would think that if there's one person that you could make the exception for, it is the guy that everybody wants right now, the free agent. He is clearly the best available coach. Is there a scenario where he can say that he's going to be the Florida head coach, which will allow Florida to do all of the recruiting and the transfer, and they can work on that stuff, and he can kind of work overtime, which I know is tough to do, but can't he also just focus on what Ole Miss is right now? As I say it, I know it's not possible, but I wish it could be, because it's so unfortunate to just have to throw away a season like this and a run, one of the strongest seasons in Ole Miss history, just to give it up because of scheduling. It sucks. That's all I have on the coaching front. What do we got still coming up? A few more games, college football playoffs. We're going to take a quick timeout, water break. Be right back.
My name's Blake.
All right, so one game that we didn't really get to touch on much last weekend was Missouri-Oklahoma, mostly because I didn't think much of it, because Mizzou was going to be without Bo Pribula, but then Pribula did his best John Mateer impression against John Mateer, returning to the football field just weeks after what looked to be an incredibly gruesome injury. I still don't understand how he came away just out for a couple of weeks. That looked like it was like a season ender. However, he comes back, and just like Mateer in the Red River Shootout, it's not enough. I hate that to say that. I think they both scored 6 points in their return. Oklahoma wins, covers. Final score is 17-6. Ugly defensive game. We talked at the beginning of this show how Oregon's offense is starting to peak at the right time. This Oklahoma defense is doing just that. 3 straight dominant outings for Brent Venable's defense. Forced 2 Tiger turnovers in this game. Held Missouri to 3 of 15 on third down. Ahmad Hardy, best tailback in college football, coming off a 300-yard game the past week. Bottled up for just 57 yards in this one. The entire Missouri ground game averaged just 2 yards a carry. And what's crazy is, just like they did against Alabama, most of the Tennessee game, for the Oklahoma defense, this is without its star player. R. Mason Thomas still sidelined after he got banged up against Tennessee. And here they are with now 3 straight wins where you can just say, like, that is because of our defense. In the month of November alone, this Oklahoma defense is holding opposing offenses to 71 rushing yards per game, 2 yards a carry. They have 8 turnovers in that stretch, averaging 4 sacks a game. Also have one of the 10 best red zone defenses in that stretch. So look, I know it's not pretty on offense still. Another game where John Mateer is not at his best through the air. Something that I'm not too sure we're going to get following this hand surgery. You know, I forget who it was. When John Mateer first had the hand surgery, they were like, oh, this is a similar surgery to another quarterback had. It was either NFL or college. And he came back in the same time frame, came back after a few weeks, and it just wasn't the same the rest of the season. I don't think we are going to get weeks 1 through 5 John Mateer anymore. I think we're still going to get a really, full-hearted effort. We're going to get a gamer. We're going to get a guy who hits a few plays and makes a few runs, but we're not going to see the same pop through the air that we did those first 5 games. So the passing game, still not there. The running backs, which was really just Xavier Robinson this game, had just 42 yards. They were bad on third down, didn't win the time of possession battle, but if this defense is going to do its part, and then the offense can hit on like the 2 to 3 explosive plays they find, and not just find them, but turn them into scores, then they're going to be in the fight against just about every team in the college football playoffs. That's the thing. Like, yes, you'd rather the Oklahoma offense be firing on full cylinders, but at least they've got dudes that can create explosives and put you in a position to put up points. Satania broke off an 87-yard score in this game. He had a 76-yard score in the game against Ole Miss. If the offense can even just get this group into field goal range for Tate Sendell, your favorite kicker's favorite kicker, my favorite kicker, obviously, because he's the only one we talk about on the show 2 weeks in a row now, Tate Sendell. I'm your biggest fan. If the offense can just get him into field goal range, then you just hope he keeps hitting them through the uprights and that the defense will carry the rest of the load. And here this team is. Here they are. 1 game away against LSU. I think they're double-digit favorites because I believe Garrett Nussmeier is going to be out. He was out this past week in what was the most ugly game ever against Western Kentucky. I think LSU won that one 13-10. They were 23.5 point favorites by the time kickoff came around. Just terrible game. Oklahoma now is just 1 game away, that lousy team, from being an at-large team in the playoffs. And man, who could have guessed it? Ball knower. Nothing to say about Mizzou, really. Not to be mean to Mizzou fans if you're one of them, but that was cool that Perbula came back. I don't know what you want me to say. I knew that the season was kind of coming to an end with the losses along the way. It was good on the defense. Maybe you don't lose Drinkwitz. I don't know. Can't be like the best time to be a Mizzou fan, right? Another year where you just like a step below, and now this time you might also lose your head coach. Not the most fun. Anywho, what else do we want to talk about today? There were a couple other results that I'll mention before we get into a couple more things. Utah wins a shootout with Kansas State. Kansas State, I think, ran for like 420-something yards on Utah and still lost the football game. That was a statistical anomaly. Utah has always felt like a team that everybody really wants to hype up. FPI, the K Ford ratings, Josh Pate's model. It's like Utah's the best team in the Big 12. And I was just been like, there's something that doesn't fit for me. Maybe it was watching BYU go in or they went to BYU and BYU beat them up. Maybe seeing Texas Tech go into Utah and just smoke them. Like, I have thought, no matter how good they look at certain times, that there's just something missing. Maybe it's Devon Dampier, and I don't love him as a thrower all too much, but Utah gets a win. They're probably still going to be right in that little bubble outside the college football playoffs. But what a weird game that they had. Staying in the state of Utah, BYU did a good job on the road taking care of Cincinnati. I kind of like them. I kind of like BYU. I've been a hater all last year, most of this year. I don't know, man. I know that they got smoked by Texas Tech. I'll be very curious to see what happens in that rematch if they get there. They should get there. I would still take Texas Tech, but it was an impressive win against a good Cincinnati team. So I wanted to talk about those games for just a second. Notre Dame kicked the fuck out of Syracuse. I got a lot of Syracuse fans in my life, some that are very near and dear to my heart. Feels like a little Dino Babers 2.0. And I know this is for a small subsection of college football fans, but Dino Babers came to Syracuse, and in his first season, pretty dang good. I think they were like a 9-win team, 8-win team, whatever it was. First season, it was like, oh shoot, does Syracuse have their head coach? And then after that, it all just kind of tanked down and down and down. Is that happening here? I know the season changed when Steve Angeli went. I know they lost a ton of contributors from last year's team. Very curious to see what the rebound's going to look like, because that game was awful. That game was terrible. It's 35-0 after the first quarter. Notre Dame, I think Syracuse dominated the time of possession. Crazy game in that one. Was there anything else? Any other outcomes that you wanted to discuss? I think that's it. Everybody else played a bunch of cupcakes. Like I said, it wasn't really a super exciting weekend of college football. Let's see. So one thing that I will say, when we were talking about Oklahoma just a few minutes ago and talking about how they were like an incomplete project because of their offense right now, it led me to think like, who in this sport right now are the full-fledged, hitting on all three phases teams in college football? How many can I say, like, offense, defense, special teams in the month of November I trust? I've got 4. I got 4 teams that I trust. Obviously, the list starts with Ohio State. I know they haven't really been tested all too often this season, but the talent that is on display, their consistency, offense, defense, special teams, like, it's so clearly Ohio State above everybody else. It's been so funny doing a college football show this year and spending so little time talking about the best team in the sport, but they just really haven't had many things that deserve our attention, I guess, in a bad way. Like, what am I going to sit here every week be like, yeah, Ohio State. We'll talk about them this week with the game coming up, but they're clearly the best team we've seen on a football field and the team that you have to trust most heading into the college football playoffs. Now, this might sound a little bit crazy, but when I think of like, okay, well, who's next? Right now, my mind's going to Georgia. They are humming right now. I don't think I'm watching a team other than the Buckeyes playing more complete football at this given moment than the Bulldogs. The offense is so far developed from where it was the first few weeks of the regular season, and that's the offensive line play. That's the running backs. That's Gunnar Stockton having full control of this offense. Even Mike Bobo, to an extent, doing a really nice job calling plays. The defense was the big concern, allowing points to just about everybody. Tennessee, Ole Miss. You're starting to see some improvements. They're beating up on bad teams, but you're starting to see the pass rush come a little bit more alive, and for a young defense, seeing them gradually improve by this time of the year is what you want to see, I guess. So Georgia's who I go to next. After that, Indiana, they just have to be on the list. They've given us no reason to not have them in like teams I trust this college football season. They're undefeated. They have one of the best wins of the year going into Autzen and taking down Oregon. Offense, Fernando Mendoza playing the best quarterback play in college football. I think he's been the most consistent. They've got 2 great wideouts. People just didn't realize the enhancements they made to that team. They weren't just settled after 1 year and being like, okay, cool, we're good. No, they upgraded at a lot of major positions, and how they're here is one of the few undefeateds left in college football. So Indiana still deserves to be on the list. I've got them 3. And then the 4th, I've been on it all year. I'm still on it, man. Texas Tech. I know that this team gets brushed aside because of the conference it plays in. I get it. But I'll continue to be adamant how this is a legit national title contender and one of the more well-rounded teams in college football. They have a top 4 scoring offense and defense. They're top 10 in total sacks. They're the 3rd best team in the turnover margin, top 10 in explosive plays, top 10 in explosive plays allowed. And here's the thing about this team, too. When the other best teams in the conference go to play them, they smoke them. They dominated Utah. They dominated BYU. When they play their best opponents, they look their best. And one loss you're sitting here, it was without your starting quarterback, without your best run defender. Texas Tech, to me, like I have them here as my fourth team that I trust in college football right now to win it all. That's my list. Everybody else I've got issues with. At least one, if not more. Alabama's ground game scares me. Oklahoma's offense overall scares me. Everything scares me about Texas A&M. The closest I'd say Oregon. Oregon was almost number 5. I just have some minor concerns right now, both defensively and then with the health of the offense. I know I'm hyping up the fact that DeCorian Moore and Evan Stewart are going to be back for the playoffs. I want to see them back for the playoffs. Can they be back? Then I'll have the full faith. Oregon is like right there. Ole Miss's defense doesn't give me a ton of confidence. Miami's quarterback play doesn't give me a ton of confidence. I would love to put Notre Dame on that list. I've been on Notre Dame as one of the best teams in college football for a while now, and the development they've made, they should be on that list. However, football consists of 3 phases. Their special teams is an absolute nightmare. I think they've gone through 2 kickers now, Mitch Jeter, Eric Schmidt. Notre Dame is converting 55.6% of its field goals, which is 127th in college football. They've also missed 4 PATs. Love everything else about Notre Dame. They got the best player in college football in Jeremiah Love, a quarterback that's playing great football, a defense that's gotten better, playmakers out wide. The third phase, even though it might not be the most important one, is still an important one, and they're not just bad, they're one of the worst in the sport. So yeah, those are my top 4 teams right now. I know we haven't done a ton of big picture stuff. This show has been a lot of recaps, previews, rankings. Those are the top 4 teams right now. Ohio State, and they're up by a lot. Georgia, Indiana, Texas Tech. Go play some futures. All right, I don't think we need any more breaks because we got just one more thing to do here. We are going to finish up with some playoff talk. Continue it on. Playoff committee rankings. Every week, we're going to finish out Monday's show by trying to predict what the committee is going to release the following day. Hate to be boring. I actually don't think we're going to see any changes this week amongst the top 12. I have no reason to adjust anything in the top 10. And I'm not going to run through the teams. Maybe if I have time, I'll put up a list. But if you want to look at the list, I just gave you 10 extra seconds to go look at the list. I don't think anything in the top 10 right now deserves to be moved. I could maybe say that Notre Dame and Oklahoma deserve to be flipped just because of how good they both, how good and bad they both looked the past week. Oh, Notre Dame 70-7, Oklahoma low scoring win over Mizzou. Maybe you flip them one just because the committee's trying to do all they can to separate Notre Dame from Miami. So maybe you do that. Maybe you jump Oregon over Ole Miss. I don't think that that's necessary. I think Ole Miss has the best win, that being over Oklahoma. Oregon has a ranked win now, but not, USC I wouldn't say is on that Oklahoma tier. So really, I don't think anything's going to change. Miami should still be the top-rated ACC team, even though they need a lot of magic to happen this weekend to clinch a spot in the conference title game. And look, despite my desire to get JMU in, Tulane's win over Temple was convincing enough where I don't think you can really bump them down. Like, the committee's now put themselves in a point where if Tulane just wins out, they're going to be the team, which, sucks. Obviously, you see the helmet here. I'm a JMU grad. I want them to be in the dance. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think everything's going to stay the same inside the playoff picture, that is. On the outside, you'll have teams, USC, Georgia Tech. They'll take a stumble after losing. Vandy ported on Kentucky, but I don't know if that's that much to jump them over Miami or Utah. Vandy kind of seems stuck behind Miami wherever Miami goes. I just don't know any reason why you'd say like, oh yeah, Vandy's looked better, beating up on Kentucky. Well, Miami just beat up on Virginia Tech. I don't know. I don't think anything's going to change too much. Here's what I will say. We'll finish off today's show. Obviously, you see the helmet here. I really do want to know what the committee is going to do with Pitt and SMU. And more specifically, in relation to other G5 programs. And this is the tough part about the playoff committee. They only give you a top 25. They don't give you a receiving votes. They don't give you a first 4 out. Right now, there is still a scenario where SMU and Pitt win the ACC title. there is also a chance, if they do that they're lower than 2 G5 teams. There are going to be some teams that move out of the poll this week. Illinois is going to move out because they lost poorly to Wisconsin. Who else is going to move out? Maybe Georgia Tech will fall out. I don't believe they will drop that entire way, but there's going to be a couple of teams that take a step out of the playoffs. Who moves in? Is it a second G5? Do they feel like they have to put SMU or Pitt in because they're going to be in the conference title picture? I'm just saying that the ACC doomsday scenario is very much alive. Because if you look at the AP poll, and I know they're very different in how they go, but they're also pretty similar. JMU, North Texas, and Tulane are ranked above Pitt and SMU. I'm very curious to see what the playoff committee does with those handful of teams. And we might not know because maybe none of them are in the top 25 outside of Tulane. But if we start to see another G5 in there and we don't see SMU and Pitt, there's a chance. There's a chance the ACC doesn't get that top 4, conference automatic qualifier. Praying for it. Fingers crossed. All right, well, thank you guys for listening to today's show. We're going to be back on Wednesday. Game previews. Got to talk some massive games. Like I said, last week we touched on one game. We're going to have at least 3, if not 4, to discuss on Wednesday's show. We'll talk playoffs. We'll talk any other new coaching news. And then we'll have an awesome weekend. Enjoy Thanksgiving. Enjoy rivalry weekend. And then we'll be back just in time for conference title play. Thank you guys for watching, listening. Subscribe to the channel. Follow the socials. I love you. I appreciate you. And I'll talk to you in a few days. Peace.